everyone, and welcome to the Winging It F1 podcast. We are previewing the Saudi Arabian Grand Prix, the second race of the 2023 Formula 1 season, and I'm joined by two people who haven't been sacked or suspended by a company over the last few days. It is Adam Dickinson and not Freddie Coates, because we've got a special guest. Well, I say special. I mean, it's just a guest on the podcast. It is our third favourite Scottish person in the world. It is Andrew Wright from Total Motorsport and Golf Monthly. How are you doing?
Very well, thank you, Nigel. Who are the top two Scottish people?
Well, our Total Motorsport boss, David Schiavone, and Andy Murray, and then you.
Okay, I can accept that, just.
Adam, how are you feeling?
Yeah, good, thank you. I mean, you don't actually know whether I've or not I've been sacked from any companies in the last few days, so that was a bit presumptuous. But yeah, I can neither confirm nor deny. But other than that, I'm good.
Have you been sacked by any companies, for the record?
No, I haven't. No.
Okay, there we go. So,
although I would say that even if I had been, so
okay,
I might have lied.
That's a good point. Anyway, we're going to talk about F1. Because that's what we do on this podcast. Someone just sent me a message. That's Adam. Adam sent me a message. Go away. We're going to talk first about Mercedes, because there hasn't really been any kind of significant news. But on Saturday, Mercedes put out a statement to their fans, well, it's more of a letter. Basically, I'm not going to read it all, but it's asking them to back them and that they're going to improve and get better and Bahrain hurt and that kind of thing, which I thought was kind of unusual because you don't really get these team statements at all, really. I can't think of any other occasions where it's happened after a bad result. So yeah, Adam, what were your thoughts when you saw that?
I mean, it doesn't really change too much for me. I think it's a positive step that they've done, and they are, kind of not embracing, but taking the challenge head on. But it still doesn't really change the wider situation with Mercedes that we talked about last episode, that they have wasted effectively 2 years of development on the new regulations, on a concept that they fundamentally decided doesn't work, and it goes in line with what they'd already said on the Bahrain Grand Prix weekend itself. Really, it doesn't really add too much new for that. So I think it's a good move PR-wise and in terms of fan engagement, but in terms of what I think of them as an F1 team, it doesn't change too much.
Andrew?
I think it's a sign of the sort of tribalism that's come into the sport, I think, with Drive to Survive. Obviously, like, fans are just like toxic, and it's just, yeah, it's sort of a way to like appease them a little bit. Not that I think it's going to do like a great deal in that, because I feel like it's almost going to stoke the fire a wee bit more. Okay. I think it's also like, it's like an admission that they've just designed like fundamentally quite a bad car. You know what I mean? It's like, I saw someone comparing it to, can you imagine Red Bull did this when they were struggling, at the start of the turbo hybrid era. It's like, I get that, like, Red Bull would never do that, but Red Bull also fundamentally had a good car all those years.
No, they didn't.
Just like the engine was crap.
Yeah, so that's part of the car.
Yeah, but like the car was actually, it was a well-designed car. Yeah. Whereas Mercedes's car is just like, the concept is seriously flawed. I think that's.
Sorry, I was just going to say, Red Bull won a race every season apart from one in the turbo hybrid era, didn't they? So they were they were a lot further up than Mercedes have been so far. Sorry, Andrew.
Well, Mercedes won last year, and they probably will win a race this year or more.
Okay, that's interesting. I mean, this statement to me is just PR. It's not going to affect the performance at all. And I do think you've got a point there on social media becoming so big. They always feel they have to say something now, because social media is becoming more and more important, I guess, in the perception or look of a team. But it is going to be interesting to see how Mercedes go this weekend, because we have, as we talked about in the last podcast, we have only seen the cars at one track. But if they are still behind, then it's going to be a very long season. What are your thoughts on, I guess, how the team have handled not being at the top over the last 12 months?
I mean, I think firstly on the statement, like I can't see every other team doing it. And to be honest, I can't see Ferrari or Red Bull doing it. And then I don't really think any other teams are big enough to kind of have to do it. So I do think it is maybe something unique about Mercedes that they have taken this step. So I don't think it should just be taken as a given. But
do you think someone's told them to do that? Do you think Toto Wolff or Lewis Hamilton or Russell, they've said, let's do this? Or do you think it's just the PR team who's decided to do this?
I don't think it would be the drivers.
Okay.
Yeah, I think it'll be kind of a senior decision, but whether that's one person or a group of people at the top, I don't know. But I think, I don't know, I'm kind of torn on it because on the one hand, I think the foundations that they had that took them to success in the previous era, it's shown that they are still there, especially through last season in terms of the way they were able to build up, kind of a difficult car to actually be able to challenge for race wins and take that race win, obviously, at the end. So I think to me, that looks like it's still there, but then they've just missed so badly this time. And I really thought for 2022, all of the emotion from the way that 2021 ended would really kind of light a fire under them and would be able to push them, and be able to kind of give them something extra emotionally that the other teams didn't have, but they seem to have just completely wasted that as well. So I think they've done some things well in terms of their handling of it, but fundamentally it's got to be seen as a massive failure, I think.
No. Andrew?
I think on Adam's point there, it's like, I think they did think that they had like a step up on the competition for 2022 because obviously turned up the first test with like the first spec car, and obviously Hamilton had been saying before, my team doesn't make mistakes. Mm-hmm. So I think they thought, we've got like a real card up our sleeve here that we're gonna show and like dominate, and then it's just been an absolute like flop, in that sense. But they've obviously still got the development capability. They've also still got like a team of extremely smart people there. It's just, I don't know, starting from such a poor base, it's not a good look.
See, I'm not sure. I'm not sure actually on the team they've got because they have lost James Allison, the engine guy, Mike. I forgot. Andy Cowell, they lost him, and a couple more people that I forgot over the last few years. And it is Mike Elliott who's built this car, and he built last year's car as well, I think, as well. And it could just be a coincidence that he's built these two cars and they're not at the top, or it might not. We'll have to see. But there are talks that James Allison might come back, and that's never a good sign, really, that they're looking to bring old personnel back. Because it just says that the current technical team they've got aren't doing that well. I've got the same thoughts with McLaren as well there, that the technical team isn't as strong as it has been in the past. So that is my worry with Mercedes, and we will have to see how if they can develop their way into the season, I guess, because a lot of the teams have gone with a Red Bull style concept, and that might have less potential than the Mercedes or Ferrari concept. But if it doesn't, and Mercedes find that they're stuck and they can't develop as much as they want, then and if they have to copy Red Bull next year, then the next 3 or 4 years is going to be quite difficult, I think. So that is the problem I see that Mercedes might have.
I think they can probably take heart from Aston Martin though, and how much they've gained from last year to this. Like I think before it might have been like, well, we're stuck with this concept because there's no way we can abandon it and then hope to catch up like 1-2 seconds. But Aston have shown that, you can actually change concept and make huge gains. That's following the kind of Red Bull model, but it's obviously possible.
And as has been pointed out, Aston Martin are doing that with a lot of Mercedes components to design around as well. So it shows that even with the different foundations that they've got to Red Bull, then it is there. I think, to me, the kind of worry is that if you look at a team that is fundamentally as operationally sound as Red Bull, even if they did have fallow years, then it still took them the whole of the era. It took them 7 years to catch up, get to a point where they were able to catch up to Mercedes. So I think that does speak to how difficult it is to actually get. Although, Ferrari got back a bit quicker, but I think, it does. To me, that's a worry that once a team does have that step ahead, and it's the same for every team apart from Red Bull. Like once that team does have that step ahead, it's really difficult to catch up because they are always going to be working one step ahead of you. But yeah, we'll have to see. I think the other worry is the powertrain, which doesn't. I think that's maybe where I be a bit more worried about, departure of staff and whether they've been able to replenish that. But obviously, it's frozen until 2026 fundamentally, so we'll have to see then. But yeah, I think Mercedes still can do it, but it's just going to be so difficult, a lot more difficult than if they got off on the right foot last season.
Yeah,
absolutely. Yeah.
I think they can do it. I think the Red Bull and Ferrari and the turbo hybrid era, I think to me that was mainly engine related, which I think is harder to gain.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas this is chassis related and design related, and you can obviously see the blueprints and whatever, but you've got a kind of template in front of you that you can look at the Red Bull car and Aston Martin car and try and copy it.
But if you copy it, you're always going to be behind, aren't you? So it's like Aston Martin. Are they ever going to get in front of Red Bull? Probably not. And if Mercedes do copy Red Bull's concept, I just don't see how they can kind of catch up. To me personally.
Yeah, I suppose so. That's a tough one.
And then the thing with the budget cap as well. I know people say that's been brought into closer back up, but for a team like Mercedes who used to spend more, they can't they can't go big and make a brand new concept mid-season. They have to wait for the end of the season to make a new concept because they can't, or else they'll break the budget cap rules. So that is a problem for Mercedes, I'd say as well.
Testing
so I think
limitations
it is gonna be
too.
tricky. Yeah,
and wind tunnel time and stuff.
But would it not be better to try and do that now rather than
they can, because if surely they would have planned how they're going to spend the money for the season. So if they're going to have to rip that all up, then they're writing the season off. Which do you really want to do that after one race?
That's what it sounded like though when they were saying that on the Bahrain weekend, and I think that's what this letter seems to be speaking to, is that they're accepting that the results aren't going to come quickly, or they're probably not going to come this season. To me, it definitely looked like they are writing the season off, and it's going to be about focusing on next year. But the problem is, how are they going to, they need to have some parts of the car that they're able to build on for next season and develop for next season. So it's just, I imagine most of this season is going to be about finding that and giving themselves some sort of foundation that they can then build on for 2024. But yeah, I think they are going to be completely resetting.
Yeah. Both Hamilton and Russell were overtaken by Fernando Alonso in the Bahrain Grand Prix. Alonso finished third, his 99th podium in F1, and I think pretty much everyone enjoyed seeing him back fighting at the front. We asked Andrew what he wanted to speak about before the podcast, and he said he wanted to speak about Alonso. So that's my excuse.
I'm just glad it wasn't about rugby, to be honest.
we'll get to that, don't worry.
But yeah, Alonso, the big question is, how good is he now compared to the top drivers? So Hamilton, Verstappen, Leclerc. Is he as good as them, do we think? Or is he a bit behind?
I mean, I think he's in the top category of drivers.
How many people have you got in that category?
4, probably the 4 you mentioned.
Oh, okay, that's interesting. Adam?
Right, so who's that?
Leclerc, Hamilton, Verstappen, and Andrew's putting Alonso with them.
You wouldn't put Norris in there?
No.
Why?
Not proven in a front-running car yet.
Interesting.
See,
similar with Russell. I think they're like, I'd put them top of tier 2 right now. But I would have had Jenson Button in tier 2, and he was a world champion. So it's not a slight on them. It's just you can't all be in the top tier.
I think I'd have Norris up there. I think there's a reason that he's being so highly sought after, given what's there at McLaren. I do think what he's shown at McLaren is transferable over to a top team when he does get that opportunity. But I think it is it's a pretty small club. I'll probably have those 5, and then it is harsh on Russell, but I think when you look at him compared to Hamilton over this last 2/3 of last season, I think there was a gap there, like a small gap, but a noticeable gap, and that's where the kind of borderline goes really. But yeah, I'd say 5 of Alonso, Hamilton, Verstappen, Leclerc, and Norris.
Do you think Alonso is as good as Hamilton and Verstappen now? Because I don't. As much as I love Alonso, it's hard. He's not at his best. His best for me was probably 10 years ago when he was at Ferrari, when he nearly won the title in 2012. I don't think he's as fast as Hamilton and Alonso now. I don't think he quite has that speed. I think he's got the racecraft, absolutely. In fact, he's got a bit of an old school style where he keeps it quite clean, actually, and goes for undercuts and cutbacks and that kind of thing. But in terms of outright speed, I think that's where he's missing compared to those top 2 for me.
I would agree with that. I think on race pace and racecraft, he's right there. I think on qualifying pace, he's maybe a step behind Hamilton and Verstappen, which I think was shown in 2007 when Hamilton joined the grid and schooled him.
What's that?
I think that is a key thing. Is he has been alongside Hamilton in equal machinery, and yes, there was a lot of external factors going on in that season, but Hamilton was a rookie coming in, and he was able to take the fight immediately to Alonso on the first corner of his F1 career. I think the problem with Alonso is he's not been with a competitive teammate since the
McLaren era,
Esteban
McLaren
Ocon's
era.
competitive, surely. Esteban Ocon's competitive.
But in terms of having a benchmark to like the very top, talking, I'd say Leclerc to Vettel. Obviously, Hamilton's had a few over the years. Verstappen to Ricciardo. I think Alonso hasn't had that benchmark since he was against Raikkonen, maybe 2014. Like it's a long.
Jenson Button.
I would say Jenson Button, but then it's hard.
Yeah, because
it's hard to talk about it with that car.
Yeah, like
which was a dog.
That's kind of where it is for me. Like I think he's getting the best out of the Aston Martin, but where he lines up compared to the other drivers on the grid, I'm kind of not, or in that top echelon, I'm not really sure. But I think I'd agree that qualifying pace is where he's losing something to the other drivers in that category. But I do think on like pure race pace and being able to like having that nous and being able to know how to race a race, and obviously the not just tire management but race management, and then obviously going for it when he needs to and pulling those moves. He's got to be one of the hardest drivers on the grid to defend against, and probably one of the hardest drivers to attack against as well, if not the hardest. So I think that's definitely where he makes it up, and then maybe it's just a few of the things around the edge of that he does lose out a bit.
I don't think he gets enough credit for being, he's going to be 42 years old this year, and he's still at one of the top 4, top 5 drivers, we're all saying. And I know sports people are naturally starting younger and ending older now, but to still be at this level, I think is staggering. I mean, I'll be impressed if Hamilton is like this in 3 or 4 years, which I think could happen. But I think for any racing driver to be doing what Alonso is doing is incredible, really. And yeah, for me, he's always been, I'd say, top 10 greatest F1 drivers ever. And if he won a 3rd world title, that would just cement that. Obviously, I don't think that's going to happen. But I do think he's underrated a bit in that kind of sense overall.
I actually think his reputation's actually been enhanced by being at crap teams or being in a crap car.
Oh, really?
So it's like, well, he won in 05 and 06. 07 happened, back to Renault. He's not really, for the Ferrari car was competitive, but it was by far and away the second best car on the grid. Like it wasn't like on pure pace, it shouldn't really been anywhere near the Red Bull.
Do you reckon even in 2010?
Maybe 2010s. And that's probably the closest one though.
Yeah.
And to be fair, he had an absolute shocker in that last race. We cannot forget that.
But it wasn't his fault though. It wasn't his fault.
Well, if you can't get past, was it
No one was
Vitaly Petrov?
overtaking in that race. That was the strategy.
I mean, that's a world title on the line. You've got, 40 laps to get past Vitaly Petrov.
No one was overtaking in that race, man. There was no way.
Listen,
I'm
it's
not blaming that on him.
It's a black stain against his name.
It's not. It's not.
But out with that, there's kind of like a mystique around Alonso that he benefits from having not been in like a race-winning car. Everyone's like, oh, he's one of the best, but he's in this dog of a car, so he's not competing. Just like wait till he gets the machinery, you'll see, and then he'll produce like 1 or 2 moments of magic a season, and folk are like, God, he's still one of the best,
I think he's consistent as well, though. I think the last 2 years he's been consistent. Apart from the first half of his return, first season in 2021, I think he was consistently better than Ocon, I'd say. So I think he's got consistency as well, and that's what's so impressive. He can still do it week in, week out for me. Yeah.
No, I don't disagree. He's consistent, but there's always the fallback of he's not winning because he's not got the car, which I think helps his reputation in other people's minds.
Yeah, I kind of agree with that. I think he is actually pretty well rated, and it's just a what if. Like, we don't know. I do think 2010 he should have been able to find a way to get that win, but equally 2012, if you flip it the other way, if he'd been in a better car, then he would have probably won the title with races to spare, and that was against peak Vettel. So it's a difficult one, but it's just like so far back to 05, 06. Like, that was before I was watching F1. Like, it really is such a long way back that he has had that success. And 2013 was the last time he won a race. So it's even a long time back to that. And I kind of agree with Nigel. I think him, McLaren at Baku, for example, him with Alpine at Hungary when he helped Ocon with, like, those types of drives kind of add to his mystique. But it's a difficult one to compare that to, say, the race record that Lewis Hamilton has or something like that.
Just quickly, how long do we think Alonso could race for? Because, I mean, if he's still good now, how long is that going to last for?
I mean, I honestly don't see any reason why it can't last for like another 3-4 years.
Wow, so 45.
Yeah, why not? Why not though? Do you know what I mean? If you look after yourself, if your reflexes are still there and all that, I don't.
Yeah, I mean, I think he could still get a seat on the grid if he was at a Raikkonen 2021 level, and I reckon it could be like Andrew said, like 3 or 4 or 5 years until he drops down to that level. So yeah, again, I don't see a reason why not, as long as he just doesn't burn his bridges at Aston Martin as he's done consistently throughout his career. So yeah, I think that'll be the biggest limiting factor is his kind of nous around the paddock rather than his speed.
Is that a 2-year deal he's on at Aston?
I believe so.
2-year deal.
Yes. Yeah, it's definitely multi-year, so it's at least 2, if not more.
Cheers for the clarification.
Yeah. There's always a little dig there. Anyway, there is a race this weekend, Saudi Arabia. It's the 3rd race that is taking place in Jeddah. They were actually meant to build a new track in Qiddiya, is that how you pronounce it?
Yeah.
Beginning with a Q, anyway. But they've not, well, to be fair, they've not announced anything, so I don't know if it's being built or if it's not happening at all. But it looks like Jeddah is going to stay for at least 3 or 4 more years, it looks like. What do we think of the track? Because I think, I know I just said this about Alonso, but I think it's underrated. Just because it's high speed, it's different, it's unique. I know the drivers say there's been some complaints before that it's a bit too dangerous, but as a fan, I absolutely love that. So what are your guys' thoughts? Andrew.
I mean, the first year it was on the calendar, I thought it was an absolute death trap. I was like, "There's no way you can possibly have this." It was the second last race, wasn't it, in 2021?
Yeah. Or third last? Second
last.
Like, I'm glad they've moved it to the start of the year. I just think there's just so many variables that can end up like determining the outcome of a world championship, and I kind of hated it being like the second last race with
It makes it exciting though, surely. Having those variables, having variables in sport makes it exciting, surely.
Yeah, it makes an individual race exciting, but I would hate for like a race like that to determine a world championship. Like to me, it like spits in the face of fairness, that, and I'm all about that. So,
You've been watching the wrong sport for the last few years.
yeah, precisely. But as a track, yeah, I suppose it's good. I mean, it offers very high speed, like you say, and it offers good chances for overtaking. So, yeah.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. I think I'd still not a fan of racing in Saudi Arabia, and that goes for a lot of other places that F1 races. But if you put all of that aside, then yeah, I think it is a great addition to the calendar. I think it leaves a lot for Qiddiya to live up to once it does finally get built and be added to the calendar. But it's, I mean, not a unique challenge because I guess Baku is similar, but I do genuinely think there's not many things that replicate its challenge on the calendar, you know. And if you think of, you know, it is on the edge. If that's what people love about Monaco qualifying, you know, Canada's the Wall of Champions. That's how that became iconic. So you do have to get everything right going around it, as Verstappen learned in 2021. So I think it adds something maybe not unique, but definitely different to a lot of other tracks on the calendar. I think that's a really good thing. And it'll be, I just hope that there's a good race. There'll probably be a safety car at some point, and that might shake up or it might not. But I hope it's a race that is able to do the track justice, really.
Yeah, I think it's just a high speed nature. We want to see the drivers on the limit, close to the walls, risking it, and that is what they have to do, especially in qualifying. But even in the race, there's not much tyre deck, so they can push really hard, as we've seen in the last few years with Hamilton and Verstappen obviously having that controversial fight in 2021. Then last year, Verstappen and Leclerc having a bit of a cleaner fight. But even then, they were playing DRS games because there's 3 DRS zones, and they can play that game as well. So I think that all just adds to it. So I think I wouldn't go as far as saying. I'm thinking kind of where to rank it in the calendar. Obviously, there's a lot of historic tracks like Silverstone, Interlagos, Spa that have to be right up there. But in terms of, I guess, apart from Baku, in terms of circuits being built in the last 20 years, it's got to be one of the best, I think, thinking about it.
Yeah. In
Yeah,
terms of sorry.
Yeah, in terms of like producing excitement, definitely, I would say.
Yeah, in terms of races over the last 2 years, then what is it? The Bahrain, Silverstone, Interlagos, Zandvoort, maybe. Like, there's not, you know, there's definitely less than 10, maybe kind of 6 to 8 race circuits that have had 2 good races in a row, and they're obviously the different regulations. So I think, yeah, when it comes down to that, it's definitely up there. But then I'd still have, you know, even like Hungary and Bahrain, I'd still probably have over it, just because you get a bit more actually quality of racing there. You don't get the DRS games when there's kind of more, certainly for Hungary, there's usually more of a strategic battle. So I'd say that's maybe where it falls down a bit. The races are exciting at a macro level, but, you know, if you're just looking for the action, then it's maybe not so good. So yeah, but I'd definitely say it's in that top third of circuits on the calendar.
Yeah, I mean, it's 23 race calendar now, so that's top 7 or top 8. So yeah, I think so. Yeah, probably top 8. I mean, if there is another great race this weekend, which on paper it should be a Red Bull 1-2 or Red Bull dominance, then I think that just shows that there is something about the track that creates good races. Because if you get 3 races in a row, you know, after 3 years, then there must be something about the track. I think so.
I think I read somewhere today that the track should favour Mercedes more than Bahrain, which was another reason for optimism for a good race.
That's
People, it's front limited, which plays more into Mercedes' hands than Bahrain.
Yeah, I think Mercedes' big problem was traction to the slow speed corners, and Saudi Arabia doesn't have any of that apart from the first chicane. Then even the last quarter is quite fast. So yeah, and I think Aston Martin will be up there as well, because I think they were quite happy with their high-speed performance. So, in theory, the pack should be closer to Red Bull. It's just, for me, I think Red Bull's biggest strength is tyre wear. And if they can push harder every single lap, then it's going to be quite hard to beat that. And that is where the other teams have got a lot of catching up to do, I think.
Yeah, I think that was like another kind of thing about Aston Martin and Bahrain. Like obviously they followed the Red Bull concept and their tyre wear was so much better.
Yeah.
Like Ferrari and Merck were struggling big time, and Alonso was just able to push like every single lap straight through to the end.
Yeah, I think Mercedes, it'll be difficult to see. They just keep talking about putting more downforce on the car, and I don't think they'll be able to. I don't think they'll really be able to compete. I still don't see them breaking into that. Definitely not challenging Red Bull, and also Ferrari seem to be, not too far away from Red Bull. Definitely a lot closer to Red Bull than Mercedes are. And I think for Mercedes, it will be battling Stroll. And then if Alonso is having a bad day, then they may be keeping the battle to him. But I just don't really. Yeah, I think it's going to be a Red Bull, definitely favourites. And then see if maybe Ferrari, maybe Alonso can stick their noses in. But I'm not too optimistic. I'll say that.
So do you think the pecking order is going to be similar to Bahrain? I mean, obviously it's so hard to tell, isn't it? Because it is only the second race. But that is kind of what I'm leaning towards too.
Certainly at the top. I think there's a lot more to see at the bottom, and there were just drivers who didn't have good races. I mean, seeing how the Alpines do, if they can both get a clean weekend, that should help to place them a bit more. But yeah, I think certainly at the top, I don't see too much changing.
Yeah.
Do you think there's scope for Aston Martin to be second on the grid? Like the second best team?
I mean, see, this is what I mean by Alonso's qualifying. Plus, he only did one run in Q3 in Bahrain as well, I think. Where I think there was very little between Ferrari and Aston Martin in qualifying in Bahrain. But it's just the drivers, as well, Leclerc, who did a better lap than Alonso for me. And then in the race, Aston Martin had better race pace or better tyre wear than Ferrari a bit, I thought. So, again, I think it's just going to be quite equal, personally, between those two.
I think certainly for
Yeah.
qualifying, I think Ferrari have the edge, and Leclerc in the Ferrari has the edge. I mean, he was talking about he was a 10th off Verstappen after they did their first Q3 run. So I think that's where their real strength is. I think certainly in qualifying, I'd expect the top three. Yeah, the top three, if not the top four, to be Red Bull and Ferrari lockouts. But then, yeah, maybe Alonso can sneak into fourth. But then definitely in the race, I think it's going to be a lot tighter. Again, though, I think, what Leclerc was able to drag out of the Ferrari before his engine failed, then Alonso was never catching that. So while I think it's maybe the narrative has been skewed a bit by that late retirement, because obviously, you don't want to be having those retirements, but in terms of actually how fast the, I guess, number one drivers for each team were, then I think Leclerc did have that edge. So it'll be interesting to see how that goes in Saudi Arabia. But yeah, I don't know. I'm kind of going into it with an open mind, but going into it with the order set kind of with an expectation that it will be similar or, same as last time.
Yeah. I would quite like to see Alonso not be in traffic, basically, for the first part of the race, because that's what happened in Bahrain. I'd be interested to see if he's behind the Red Bulls after lap one, can he go with them? And if he can, and even if he doesn't get ahead of them, I think that does bode well, very well, actually, for the season. So I'm hoping that's what happens. But yeah.
Just to Adam's point, I think Alonso might have caught Leclerc in Bahrain.
Really?
Yeah, well,
10 seconds, wasn't there, also?
Yeah, I think it was 9.3 seconds when Leclerc retired. He was ahead of Sainz. And Alonso finished 10 seconds ahead of Sainz.
Surely Leclerc would have increased his pace, though, surely.
I don't know, but with the tyre wear on the Ferrari.
That's interesting. I think it would have been quite close. It would have been like last 3 or 4 laps if he got there.
Yeah, but I don't think it's necessarily a given that Leclerc would have finished third. If Alonso had caught him, for example, he would have also been closing at, high speed with less tyre wear.
I didn't think
And-
we'd be
and-
arguing about a race that happened 2 weeks ago. We are. Go on, Adam, fight back.
Yeah, no, I just think Leclerc was able to get a bit more out of the Ferrari. We saw that over the whole, or Saturday and the Sunday than than Sainz. So I think he just would have been able to keep that gap. And even if Alonso did arrive, then it's still not. There are plenty of opportunities to retake at the circuit. We saw that several times in the Grand Prix. So I do think that it's one thing getting up to them, but it might take 1 or 2 laps longer to pass than actually just getting up to that point. And if you're talking about right at the end of the race, whether he would have been on the same time as Leclerc at the end of the race with no kind of no encumbering factors, then I think it would have, even if he had caught up, then I don't think he would have had the time to pass.
Well, but you're admitting it wasn't a given that Leclerc would have.
I'd
made
say
third.
80% Leclerc keeps.
I'll take that.
I will say that has brought a point to my mind. The Aston Martin straight line speed, it's even compared to the Mercedes, actually, it wasn't easy for Alonso to get past. He had to be kind of right on the back of Hamilton and Russell.
That's
on the
true.
straights. He didn't exactly zoom past. So maybe that's something to do with the drag that they've got or something else. But it did seem quite weak, even though he did get third in the end. But anyway, let's not talk about Bahrain. Let's predict what's going to happen this weekend. Who's going to be on pole position?
Are you going to predict a Leclerc pole and win again, Nigel? The Nigel Two Brains Trust.
Yes, I am. Why not? Go on then.
Wait, really?
Yes, I am. Why not?
Really?
Yeah, I don't care. Because on our Total Motorsport Slack, I say something else and I get that right. So.
Yeah, but this is the one that's going out. There's not a world
this is
feed
what
on the
millions of people around the world
exactly.
listen to, and they was the 8 people on our Slack, including you two, to see my actual prediction. But yeah, why not? I'm just going to stick with that because
You're going to die on that hill.
I'm not going to die.
Okay. We'll see.
I think out of us 3, you're going to die first.
It's Saudi Arabia. Can't rule anything out.
But yeah, I'll go in Leclerc pole. Adam?
I'm going Verstappen. It's like very boring to go Verstappen pole and win, isn't it?
Oh, wow. You're going Verstappen. Who would have thought that? Andrew?
It's a prediction. We're not trying to get it wrong.
Well, one of us is.
Yeah, I mean, I can't see anything other than Verstappen pole and another fairly dominant win, sadly.
Okay. Who do you think is going to be second in the race?
I'm going to go Leclerc second.
I'll say Verstappen second.
I'll say Leclerc second as well.
Okay, so not a Red Bull 1-2. Are you going to have Perez in third?
Yeah, I didn't really think about why I didn't have him there. Yeah, Saudi Arabia, he gets a. Yeah, I'll have him in third. It's kind of Saudi Arabian gets a tap or gets puncture or has something that encumbers his race that means it's not a one. I think on pace I can see them.
I mean, I am still banking on. I know I've banked on always, but we have only seen them at one track, so I really do hope the pecking order is different. But yeah, anyway, yes, Andrew,
It's
third.
It's the hope that kills you, Nigel. I'm going to go Alonso in third, just so it's one of each. And we obviously we can't rule out crash. So I'm going to say Perez will bin it in the wall again. And we'll have a Verstappen dominant win and Leclerc and Alonso battling out for second.
Okay, that's interesting. So who's third?
Alonso.
Oh,
who's third for you?
I didn't hear that bit. Who's third for me?
Really thought about it, haven't you?
Say Hamilton, I'll tell you.
Alonso.
Let's fill out. We did top 5 for last time, so let's fill out that 4th and 5th.
Yeah,
Nigel.
Don't worry, we're not doing the whole top 20, or else we'll be here forever. Fourth and 5th, I'll just say Perez and Hamilton. 4th and 5th for me.
I'll go Alonso and Hamilton. I was going to go Alonso and Stroll, but I bottled it. So,
just like your rugby team, I'll go Hamilton and Sainz 4th and 5th. I feel like Sainz is just like the forgotten man in F1.
Yeah, it's interesting
Mhm.
sides because he's like he is very, very good. It's just he's against Leclerc, who happens to be one of the best drivers on the grid.
It's
I think
also
that's what it is.
at Leclerc in a Ferrari that isn't the best. I think that's where it comes
Yeah.
from. Is like it's not. I mean, obviously, it's a lot better than what he would have had at McLaren if he'd stayed. But like, it's not like if the Ferrari had been the Red Bull from last season, I think he would have been. We'd see him in a better light, really. But like where Leclerc's kind of doing these heroics to be able to be in the battle for the front, whereas like even if Sainz is only a couple of tenths back, then that can mean a lot in terms of where other drivers like in similar machinery are able to come over him.
Would that not change how much you rate Norris a wee bit? Given the Sainz Norris head to head and now the Sainz Leclerc head to head.
Now, because Norris was against Sainz in his very first season, the first 2 seasons, wasn't he? So
Yeah, Norris had a fair bit of bad luck as well in terms of retirements and stuff like that in his first year, and I think he would have been at least closer to Sainz from what I remember. So yeah, I think you can really see the way that Norris has developed since then. But I think to come in and be competitive there is like good.
yeah, Norris has consistently been unbelievable. I mean, what he did to Daniel Ricciardo, I know. Ricciardo obviously had his own troubles, but to beat someone like that so well was just ridiculously good, I thought. And I mean, that's kind of what Alonso was doing to his teammates 4 or 5 years ago, to Van Dorn, and then against Massa at Ferrari, and the other teammates he's had apart from Hamilton, really. So Norris has been doing that over the last two years as well. I'd say that's what's made him so good.
If Norris does announce a big move over the next like year or even longer, if we're still like talking to Andrew, then we need to get him back on for the reaction podcast for that.
Yeah, totally. I just think it's still not tested enough for me. I'm gonna sound like a Norris hater. But obviously like the car just obviously did not suit Ricardo at all. Like I don't think the gulf they had there was.
Yeah, but he had 2 years. He had 2 very different cars, 2 different regulations. You can't. What you can say you can have 1 bad season in F1. In fact, you can have 2 bad seasons if you got a similar car, but 2 different cars. There's not many excuses, I think. There.
You can have 5 bad seasons if you're Lance Stroll. Or you can have as many bad seasons as you want. No, I know.
Just going back to the Sainz though, like what bracket would you have him in? Because if we've got the top 5 that doesn't include Russell and for you doesn't include Norris and Norris and Russell, then would both of you have Sainz in the same bracket as those 2 then, or would you have them in their own thing? Or
I would have more brackets. It's like I wouldn't have Alonso and Hamilton and Verstappen's bracket. Like for me, there's about 10 brackets. There is. There's not 3 or 4. There's 10.
There's 20 brackets.
There probably is 20 brackets. I probably could make a 1 to 20 ranking right now, actually.
Well, you did on Total Motorsport last week,
I have.
So check it out.
I'm always right for Total Motorsport. Well, yeah, I think the Sainz is like 7th or 8th. Yeah, it's probably like 7th, isn't he? In terms of, if we're making a list, I'd say it's about 7th, give or take.
But I mean, I wouldn't have like Norris definitively ahead of Sainz in the pecking order,
Really?
given their record as teammates. Yeah.
But you're judging Norris on his first 2 seasons when Sainz was in his 5th and 6th season.
Yeah, but then you're putting him in. Well, sorry, you're not, but Adam's putting him in the top tier, where Hamilton Hamilton joined the grid and went up against Alonso.
No, I don't think Adam's saying Norris is better than Hamilton, but he said he's in the top 5 drivers, and if we're going to have a tier of 4 or 5, which I think is stupid, then Norris would be in the top tier.
No, Adam definitively put him in the top tier.
Let me speak for Adam. Adam does not think Lando Norris is as good as or better than Lewis Hamilton. He does not think that, do you?
No, I do not think that.
So there you go.
But I think
now if you turn that round and said yes, then you would have really done me there. Well, go on.
Yeah, I just think in terms of the talent, the raw speed, and the way he's been able to put it down in the McLaren, then I think that all points to him being a top tier driver. And yeah, I think we'll see if it does keep going downhill at McLaren, then we'll see that reflected in what the demand is for him. Because I think bar bar Red Bull, I think most other teams would want to have him in their team. I'd say 9 out of 10 would want to have him in their team, and maybe even Red Bull would be in for him as well. So yeah, I just think that's really where it comes from. Like the intangibles, I think when you see him race and you see what he's able to get out of the car, just puts him in that top bracket for me. And yeah, he's fourth or fifth in that bracket, but I think he's still got enough. Again, like it's difficult, but I think he's just got enough of that advantage over, the likes of Russell and Sainz and whoever
I
else
think so.
putting below. Yeah, Russell's a difficult one, but I think.
But
yeah,
my question was going to be Norris versus Russell, same car. What do you think happens?
Oh,
So I don't think you could say one way or the other.
Russell won in F2, didn't he? Yeah,
I think I'd actually give Russell the edge in that personally.
Again, but also then it's like, who's the car kind of designed around? I think you could put them in, the same car. You could have like 5 or, 4 or 5 different same cars, and they probably
get different results.
Yeah, get different results. So, but
that's
I don't know. It's a really tough one. It is a really tough one. But yeah,
and that's why I say to Nigel why, Verstappen is obviously one of the best drivers, but I would like to see him in another car until I, would even dream of definitively rating him as the best.
What's the best driver in F1 now? I think you broke all there. Just repeat what you said.
I said yes.
Oh, you said yeah. No, seriously, you actually broke all there. So you're saying Verstappen's not the best driver in F1 right now?
I'm saying he's not, for me, definitively the best driver right now. I'm not saying he's not the best driver.
So what are you saying?
That he's not clear.
It's unclear right now. I wouldn't have him or Hamilton, either of them, as the definitive number one.
No,
2021 proved for me that Verstappen is better for me, ignoring the stupidness at the end, obviously.
Yeah, I mean, we're going to butt heads on that, so
we can if you want.
Also,
well, I mean, why? Like, why? Why did that prove definitively?
Because I think Verstappen won in a worse car, not you.
Personally. Yeah, I think he had a better car.
That's a load of rubbish. That is a load of rubbish. Look at the 50-50 races. No, Bahrain, the 50-50 race in terms of car performance. Okay, lost that one.
I don't agree.
He lost that one. France, he beat Hamilton. Zandvoort beat Hamilton. What else was a 50-50
But is France
race?
going down as a 50-50 race?
Well, if anything, Mercedes were better in France 2021, and I think Verstappen.
We had this debate
with
at the time,
perfect strategy,
and it's
with the perfect strategy. In fact, go back and watch every single 2021 episode, and you'll see this debate. But I genuinely think in 2021 Verstappen won in a worse car, and that has only happened 4 or 5 times in F1's history. Probably where a driver's won the championship with not having the best car, and for me, that is just incredible.
Well, I mean, Adrian Newey said after the season that he thought Red Bull had the better car across the year.
Did he?
And also I would say, I mean, I wouldn't say Bahrain was a 50-50.
Why not?
I mean, I'd say Red Bull definitely had the better package in Bahrain, if we're going to be pedantic about it.
I don't think so.
Which,
not in the race. No.
Why not?
It was 50-50.
Well, there we go. I disagree. And Adrian Newey did say that Red Bull had the better car across the season, so you can go and look that one up.
If you look at Hamilton's mistakes in the season, he made more mistakes than Verstappen under the pressure. I mean, obviously, I'm time to go through that.
So did Michael Massey, though.
Imola, Baku. We'll talk about Hamilton versus Verstappen. Imola, Baku, Silverstone. Obviously, we can't speak about, but personally, I thought that was Hamilton's fault, and he got the right penalty in the end. In qualifying, hold on. Monaco, he was 7th behind Bottas. There's many examples where Hamilton made mistakes and Verstappen, I think, didn't make. Did he make any? I mean, in terms of racing, yeah, he went over the limit. So I guess we
Yeah.
count that one. But in terms of like actual mistakes, like Hamilton at Imola or Baku, he didn't do any of that.
Well, I think
What was Hamilton's mistake at Baku?
Well, he locked up.
Accidentally hitting a switch.
Yeah, that's a mistake.
Yeah, but it's not like a driver error. It's a
He lost
freak.
25 points. Of course,
It's
that is
a
driver.
it's,
Whose fault was it? It was Hamilton. It's a driver error.
it's a freak accident.
it's not a racing.
Accident.
It's not a racing mistake.
That is. That's not a mistake. That's a freak incident that happens
Whose fault was it?
once in 10 seasons.
And it happened to Hamilton.
Yeah.
That is his fault. Yeah.
No, I mean,
Anyway.
you can lay the blame equally at the bloody design of the Mercedes steering wheel if we're gonna get. To me, that's not a
The
Hamilton
steering
error.
wheel that he knows that he's been using all season, and that hasn't changed.
I don't know how you can look at that Baku incident and call it anything other than a bit of bad luck for Hamilton that he like turned left quickly, like unknowingly hit the magic button on and like locked up massively. It's not his mistake. It's an accident.
I
We
don't think
certainly can't include that in the list of Hamilton mistakes that
Yes,
proves
you can.
Verstappen is better in 2021.
Small mistake that led to massive consequences.
I think if you're talking about him as a driver, what does that say about him as a driver in a negative
Nothing.
light?
That under the very highest pressure, Verstappen was better for me.
No. Like, what does that like single mistake, freak accident, whatever you want to call it? What does that say about Hamilton negatively as a driver?
I've just said that under the very highest pressure, Verstappen is a bit better.
But that's not like that's talking about it as a general thing.
Yeah,
like if you're
talking micro.
If you're looking at the incident itself,
I'm using that as an
like,
example.
What driving like skill? How does that what element of him as a driver does that show like negativity in? Well, exactly then.
But in the same race, Verstappen was going to win until his tyre blew up.
Yeah,
His mistake. Pushing too hard. shouldn't have driven over a bit of debris.
Anyway, right, we're going to wrap up the podcast. Andrew, is there anything you want to say to Adam about the rugby or not? No.
Well, we'll pass it over to Adam and get his thoughts on the.
He doesn't really care about it this year.
It is.
Exciting.
I do. I feel like it is. I mean, I'm not a massive Borthwick fan anyway, but I just think it was such a daft decision to sack Eddie Jones a year before the World Cup. Like, I just think that's so, when you've invested so much in a World Cup cycle to then effectively bin it off. Yeah, I just don't think you can expect really any coach, bar, maybe one or two, to come in and make a difference in a year that Eddie Jones wouldn't have been able to do, having been building up to that. So yeah, I'm not really like, yeah, I feel like I've just disowned really this year now, check back in after the World Cup. But having said that, like, it's not, it is a really poor performance, and also just the fact that it used to be relied upon that we could beat Scotland every year, and then it's not. I don't know, what was the last time we beat you in 2020?
No, I think it's 6 years since your last one. It was that it was like extremely wet day, and
I think that was 2020. But then it's maybe like one. It might be like 1 win in 6, something like that. Like, it used to be much more reliable, and all of a sudden it's not a guaranteed win column.
I think what it is like unbeaten in like 6 years at Twickenham, and the win you got was at Murrayfield.
Yeah.
But yeah, that was. I think the worst thing about the England performance was almost like the players looked like they chucked it at like 60 minutes. Do you know what I mean? Yeah. Just like there was not even like not sprinting back, just like on you go. Yeah. Whatever, go score another try.
Yeah, there's a lot more. I think there's a lot of kind of personnel decisions that they have to make and stick to, really. I think like chopping and changing between Smith and Farrell, like they're not kind of like for like replacements. You've got to really stick with one and then build the team around that. But yeah, beyond that, the players just look like mentally they've checked out. I think if you look at this compared to 2019, where even like, yes, they were playing a lot better, but also just the intensity that they brought was so much higher, and I don't think that's been there at all. So yeah, I'm not very hyped for the World Cup, but I'll have to see. I'm British for the World Cup, not English.
It was dismal. It was dismal. It was the only bright spark of my weekend.
That's because you're covering the golf and that's boring. But anyway, you
It
can
was
find
very
Adam's.
boring.
You can find Andrew's articles at Golf Monthly, because that's who he writes for, gets paid for. And he also gets paid by Total Motorsport as well, where you can find this podcast and our features and stuff as well. So thanks to Adam, thanks to Andrew, thanks to you for listening or watching on YouTube, Spotify, Apple, or wherever you're listening to this. I don't know any other platforms. We will see you next week after the Saudi Arabia Grand Prix. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.